our previous session, we had really focused on strategic planning really with the self as an individual, really thinking about our current goals, challenges, priorities, and what kind of development and what kind of strategies might we need to put in place to begin our plans, moving forward with that. And so today we are coming together now and really thinking in the context of how are we doing diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice work with others? Okay, so really trying to center and think about inclusion and equity working groups. So some folks have different, labels and titles for that. It may be DEI committee or task force. For myself on my campus, I get to help oversee an inclusive culture council. So for the entire College of Engineering, it's made up of staff and faculty that really serve all departments, programs, and major units within the college. And that was established and needed to be established by a faculty vote to actually establish that within the rules of the college. And so that particular project is now about a year and a half in the making. So we spent an entire academic year kind of prepping, planning, what this entity could really be and get us to the vote, where I'm happy to report we had unanimous support from the faculty. So it is established. And so this year we're really rolling and going with other things too. I also help support another important area on our current campus as well in a lot of their efforts. So all of our enrollment management divisions, so think of registrar, financial aid, for example, admissions, which has recruitment and our operations folks. And so I've been asked, and I help to advise and lead a DEI advisory council for their entire division. And their charge in particular is really to help enhance the retention of their professional staff and student staff within the division, okay? And so those are two really active, big groups that I'm helping to really support and advise and consult with in a lot of strategies, for example. And I would love to hear more from you all about your experiences, especially as you're thinking about your diversity, equity, inclusion work, even day to day. Might this be an experience you are having where you are connecting, you are a part of, a group, even within your role, for example? Are you a leader that has a unit or organization that has established or will be establishing some sort of committee or group, for example? Because now we're moving into that place of, okay, it's more than just myself, right, that I'm strategically planning for. It's how can we as a group start really strategically planning together and collaborate and really serve and support those that we are really kind of in our purpose, right, or why we're coming together, who are our stakeholders and who are we supporting as well. So with that in mind, I would love to hear from you all kind of in the chat, and I would love for some folks to kind of join on the mic as well. I want to know about your experience, right? And so really around diversity, inclusion, and equity committees, task forces, councils, etc. What has that been for you in your experience, okay? Because I want to establish interest in the connections that folks have with doing DEI work with a group, for example. So if you don't mind, we can raise our hand for anyone that can share out, amongst the group and in the chat, kind of as a part of our introductions. Share a little bit about yourself, your name, perhaps your role, kind of where you're joining us from as well. And then here's the part where I'm going to ask you to think about your experience with DEI working groups. So might you be in a place where you're in the process of establishing a local committee? Or maybe are you involved with a campus-wide committee or an initiative that might be coming up? Do you serve as a member of a DEI committee currently? Are you actively participating, for example? Perhaps think of that leadership role. Are you a leader of a DEI committee and or a leader of an organization, unit, program that has a DEI committee that you're a part of sponsoring? Otherwise, hey, might you be curious about DEI committees? Are you looking to get involved? Might this be a newer experience for you as well? So great job already, Andy. Appreciate your active, engagement in the chat already, and Rachel. And so, who might want to kind of come on the mic and kind of share a little bit more, kind of about your experience. And as you think of DEI committees and groups, how's that resonating for you and why you might be here today? Who'd like to share? Excellent, Jonna. Appreciate you.
Well, and you said my name right. That was amazing.
Oh, good. Thank you for that confirmation.
Yeah. So I'm the executive director of PALS, and we're part of the Minnesota State system, and I'm located at Minnesota State Mankato. So I'm trying to get involved at a system level in the Equity 2030 work that has been really kind of kicked into gear over the last year or two. But I also lead a team of 12, and I'm trying to figure out, and we're all library and IT support people in my group. And they're very kind of helping faculty and staff help students. We're not really direct student support. So like trying to figure out, what does professional development look like in our department from a DEI perspective? How do I make those connections and help people make those connections when they might not see the immediate need for it, or they're not very connected. We're not very connected to the MSU culture, and we're also not very connected to the system office because of our role. And so like there's a whole bunch wrapped up in there, but that's really, I'm thinking about professional development right now.
Oh, and thank you so much for naming that component. And we're shortly going to actually move into our tool, kind of the resource that I'm going to provide for us to utilize. And in thinking of an infrastructure of a working group, even amongst Donna, your team of 12, might there be a few folks that really might be interested in helping to focus those efforts? And you just named kind of areas of focus or goals, right? Or even the purpose of that group kind of coming together specifically around establishing professional development support, opportunities, resources for our team, right? That could be an overarching purpose and goal specifically within a working group. And so you've kind of planted a seed, have kind of an idea there. So keep utilizing that as we work through this planning guide as well. Thank you for sharing. That was brilliant. That's excellent. All right. And I appreciate other folks just kind of naming here in the chat as we kind of go through that as well. And folks are curious, wanting to really center DEI work. I'm really supporting students and kind of prepping for their careers, which I love that. Reviewing and revising policies and procedures, especially through an equity lens. That could be a goal, right? Very important purpose or establishment of a DEI working group. And really, how can we prepare, strategically plan, develop processes, write rubrics or standards, for example, to kind of review and revise policies. So that's excellent, Rachel. Appreciate you bringing that in. Just wanted to double click on that. And Liz, excellent. You're working to build an advisory group. Excellent. And so this guide and plan will definitely be of support, and then you've already given feedback on that as well. So I can't wait for you to use it and give feedback around that too. Excellent. So a goal, increase diversity in leadership, right? Including the board and committees. So that could be a purpose or kind of charge, and even a group can kind of work on that as well. And then focus on learning communities. Excellent. Especially needing an advisory group, wanting to have that student-centered and equity focus. So appreciate you all sharing. I really, really am excited for you to start engaging with this tool and resource that I've developed and created for the session today. And here's something to know. This has been kind of an iteration. So I've had the opportunity to work with multiple groups that are really trying to focus diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, social justice in a lot of areas, around a campus, even through my consulting company with various organizations. And so just know this planning guide is continuously developing. I'm continuously iterating, adding to, tweaking things, and I want to invite you to do the same. So momentarily, I'm going to put a link, I'm hoping, to a Google document version of that. And what I want to invite you to do is to download a copy for yourself. And in fact, if you want to download 2 copies and just use one today to kind of capture your notes and, kind of play around with, absolutely. And then you still have the template, that's great. And I want to invite you, make it your own. Okay. These are guiding principles, strategies, approaches that have really been effective and important with the various groups that I've worked with. Okay. and you will know your context and purpose much better than I ever could, unless we're kind of working, right? And I'm consulting with you and I'm there and a part of it, okay? So just try to personalize it, make it your own. And let me try to go ahead and copy and paste this link here. And what will be really helpful is for folks to try it out and let me know. Do you have access? Can you download? Do I need to make any adjustments? That's why we're here. So I believe I've dropped the link in the chat. My hope is you can go to that link, no problem. Then you can click download so that you have your version that you can edit, take notes, play around with. So Jana, you're like, okay, great. Alfredo, yes, it's working. Can you download too? And then when you open that up, can you type in it? And yay! Don't you love it when technology, it's all coming together? It works. So really appreciate that. Okay. Also, I may just encourage, Liz and Samuel, if you can just kind of save that just in case anybody else joins or we need to share that again. I'm always happy to put it in the chat just in case something else comes up. If you don't mind just having that on hand, that'd be helpful. Okay, so let me go ahead and, if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen. Here's kind of our view, right? We go in there, strategic planning for inclusion and equity groups. And so this has really also been established, you should know from my background and experience, one of the things that oftentimes happens, especially leaders or practitioners of diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, we can kind of be set up as a party of one. Okay, so a brand new role or position. In fact, on my campus, the last 2 positions I've had have been inaugural diversity, equity, and inclusion roles in 2 different areas of the campus. Okay, so that was a part of just one person in a role, and then you get to build out what is the role, functions, and priorities. And so I've had to really rely on a lot of important collaborations and working groups to really move things forward, gain new opportunities, to really accomplish a lot of the work that I'm doing, right? And so that is kind of, just know, that's kind of in the background of my experience of really needing to work with a lot of groups as well. So what I want to start out and establish for all of us as well is we're going to pretty quickly move into some breakout rooms after I kind of describe really quick the mission and scope and also alignment. Because I want you to kind of try this on, start thinking about it in your context and see what's coming up for you as well. So let me just go ahead and kind of process and describe and tell you about this component as well. Now, oftentimes when you're forming a group, right, or you're going to collaborate with others, especially around whatever goals or purpose you might have, just know that everyone that's coming to that space, they likely have their own ideas of what we should be doing, what is needed, what the priorities are, what this group should be doing, right, together, right? What are our goals together? So it is very, very important to spend that time really establishing and being clear, what are our priorities? What are we coming together to really do? For how long? Why? In a lot of sense. When it's left really open and ambiguous, that's really a space where, that strategic planning will oftentimes need to be brought in because folks will have, felt like, well, we've been meeting for an entire semester. I'm not really sure what we're doing or why are we even together, or kind of trying to do this work, for example. So here are some important questions that I oftentimes utilize with groups, especially as they're establishing, and please know, we keep revisiting these. It's not just a one-time, place or step, because different changes will happen, new priorities may come up, this could really adjust and you may need to get a little bit more clear as you're doing your work as well. So some of the things to think about, especially around context, is really why might a group be forming? What is the need? What's happening right now in our current environment? What is the catalyst? What is sparking this? Okay. What's prompting a creation or a need to do things differently? Okay. Really getting clear. Make sure to talk through that process. Oftentimes, especially as we think of change management, we'll focus a lot on the change, the actual tasks. We're not necessarily focusing on that transition, right? The psychological and emotional process that people go through to navigate that change. So dive in there, discuss it, really, illuminate what's coming up and the impact. of why we might need some sort of strategic planning group or entity kind of coming together. Next is really thinking about the output, right? What is the vision? What is going to be expected, from this group? And what are the various expectations that might be coming up? Because you may have to kind of mitigate, level set, be really clear about that as well. This next one is really thinking about, oftentimes there may be a historical element. These groups may have existed, other, efforts may have happened in the past. What were they? What was impactful? What was effective? You've all been in kind of those experiences where folks, oh, we've already done that before and it didn't work beforehand. Oh, I didn't know that, and you're not necessarily able to, respond in that agile way because this is new information for you, right? And so dig in there, kind of find what's worked, what hasn't. That may really kind of get you going with a lot of different strategies. Next, get clear about the stakeholders and what's important. Oftentimes we may want to group or lump all students together, and that's something that I've had to really be intentional coming into our College of Engineering. Looking at our entire website when I first arrived, it was very much designed for undergraduate students. In fact, what happened was our graduate students had to come together and form their own websites just for graduate students, for example, because a lot wasn't relevant. And so it's really important that we get to know and get very clear who are our stakeholders. Just like the enrollment management group I was talking about, their stakeholders are professional and student employees that work within the division, right? So who are we supporting and what information do we need to know? Next, we need to have definitions, kind of common language on what we're even meaning by diversity, equity, and inclusion. What aspects of diversity are those differences that might make a difference in this context and why, right? Are there definitions that the institution already utilizes, especially around equity and inclusion? Make sure that's clear. Oftentimes they have to create kind of those definitions and common language guides for groups just coming together as well. And this really leads into an exercise that is so important. This right here, if you can establish it with a group, you will find it will be very beneficial as you think about establishing a website presence, as you invite guest speakers, as you're trying to describe to the rest of your organization why you exist. You really capture that purpose statement. Make sure it's very clear and in a sense says what you can be expected to do as a group. So this is a really important exercise that I do with groups that I work with. And then the final component before we go into our 3 breakout rooms as well is really around alignment. This is the other component. There's oftentimes other DEI, justice work happening on campus or, kind of broader initiatives. It's really important that any groups that are coming together, for example, even within your system structure, keep going bigger and bigger. Within the University of Colorado, for example, there are 4 campuses, and then we have a system level, like diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, strategic plan. So we need to know what's already established, what's expected of us. This, in a sense, is really going to support you as you think of those opportunities, needing more resources. When you're in alignment, you're going to likely have more folks to collaborate with, have access to greater funding and resources, because this is already what, your institution, organization, right? The campus is already saying, these are our priorities. This is what we're focusing on. So especially, even when Jonna brought up like understanding even within my role or the work that we're doing, we need to find our jobs, right? Our organizations, our units within these strategic plans. How does our function and role really support or actualize aspects of those bigger picture plans that we need to align with as well? Okay, so hopefully that was a decent overview. Let me pause though and check in and see what questions and comments folks have, because I want to next send you into a few breakout rooms, just smaller groups, so you can start talking about this, kind of responding and thinking about these questions in just a moment. But let me pause and check in. What questions do you have? Feedback, thoughts? Anyone have experience kind of engaging around any of the mission scope alignment that you'd like to share?
Amy, something that comes to my mind as I look this over and as I kind of identify myself in my social identities as a white woman coordinating a diversity institute agenda, right? Is that I think while I can do the legwork, and I think while I can, coordinate the speakers and the schedule in partnership with, of course, Samuel, who's been working so hard on all of that outreach, I do think that this is really important in reflecting so that it can be communicated. Like, I'm not here by asking you to be here. I'm not here to give you extra work, to be an additional burden, but really to take your experiences and expertise and incorporate that into the work that's happening. Just as I'm working with, staff and faculty of color who I might invite to participate, because I did see some kind of framing from folks like, we're trying to expand equity or like diverse representation on our groups. And I think that having these things in mind and being thoughtful about what that means then for participants is another kind of self check, that I have in mind as I'm looking over this. So I appreciate it.
Thank you for that reflection. And Liz, I'm also mapping, if I kind of go ahead a little bit, because I'm the facilitator and I have that power, y'all. I think that also comes into when you're thinking of your group membership. And we're going to talk here in a little bit, the team building, because I will say the trust component and the environment that you create amongst a group that are collaborating, especially in centering DEI and justice work, is so important. There's so many important considerations, and just expect each individual that you have joining will have different needs, right? Different backgrounds, different ways their identities have been experienced or navigating the institution or the organization, for example. And so I'm also mapping to these segments as you're bringing that up, something just to kind of see if you can make connections too, once we get to those segments, but that's excellent. Thank you for that. All right. Did I see something in the chat as well? Oh, good. I'm glad that you find that this would be helpful, just kind of framework. And just know that is a lot of what I kind of help do as far as strategic planning. How can I really take this big, giant kind of, what are we doing? Who are we? What are we supposed to do? And trying to provide some structure, some support, and development in this form of kind of tools and resources, because I much rather like development when you're actually doing something, right? You're trying to accomplish or infuse it in your work in a sense. So I'm glad that can be helpful. All right, so let me go ahead and I want to pause sharing. Actually, I want to stop sharing now because I want you to have a chance to actually connect and talk a little bit about that mission and scope and alignment. See what's coming up for you, if it's sparking ideas or thoughts as well. And so if you don't mind, we're going to have to use the chat because I want to know which of the breakout rooms you're wanting to go into. Okay. So for this one, the breakout rooms, there's going to be 3 of them. The first one will be kind of our curious group. This is one. Okay. So folks that are interested in learning more, I'm not really currently an active member of a DEI committee, just kind of curious, for example. So that's going to be our group number 1. Group number 2 are going to be current leaders of DEI groups, and or if you've been tasked with establishing kind of a committee or a DEI initiative. So that's going to be our group number 2. And then group number 3 is going to be those active members of a DEI working group or committee. So you don't necessarily have a kind of a leadership role. You're a part of one though, and you participate and are an active member. So if you don't mind, in the chat, could you let me know, do you want to be a part of curious, right? Our group leaders and or our active committee members as well. And we're going to set up the breakout rooms in that order. And I love it. Group 2 or 3. We'll see how many 3s there are as well. Okay, appreciate that. Excellent. And I don't know, Liz, might you be able to start putting together the groups? Because I'm going to put in the chat kind of what we're going to do in each of those when we come in there, okay? So I'm going to have you look through those first couple of segments of the resource guide. And here's kind of what we're thinking here. That curious group that'll be in our group 1 that you're not necessarily a part of a DEI committee, just here to learn and develop, for example. Think about why might these be important questions, right, for a group to consider, or in doing DEI work in general. For our leaders, how might these questions really enhance your current efforts, right? What some of the work you've already done that you can find within them, which of these might be next steps or things you want to prioritize? And then for our active DEI members, for example, um, have you experienced processing this with your group? Have you talked about these things? Might any of these be important things you want to bring up as you go back into your DEI committees as a place to explore? Okay. Okay, enjoy your conversations. We'll be back probably in about 10 minutes or so. So enjoy. Welcome back, folks. I hope you had a great, kind of initial kind of conversation, start kind of digesting the tool a little bit. I think it's always great, not only kind of giving an overview, but then giving you some time to try it on, right? Chew on it, put it in your own words. So I would love to hear, if you don't mind, some highlights of kind of what came out of your conversation, any ideas, ahas, anything that you want to bring up and kind of discuss with the group. So might we start with our group number 1, which I had such a great privilege to spend some time with. Did anyone want to share any kind of takeaways or things that came up with our curious group in group 1?
I will say that I took some notes here. We talked about that we thought any framework is a good framework, and we appreciated that there were so many ways of looking at these DEI efforts. And we had pointed out that DEI work can feel really fluid, and so you get pulled in a lot of directions or in no direction at the same time, and that having a framework like this is probably a good way to start. And so then we started it on the first question about why a group might be forming, and we spent some time talking about why groups might be forming to do this kind of work. That's where we were at.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. Everything from kind of global, national, political, and social, happenings, events, crises, to more local, even things that might be happening on your campus or within your group and community. And we kind of explored even stakeholders, right? So anyone that would have a stake, quote unquote, or be impacted by any of your goals or your work as well. Anyone can drive kind of a shift or change, right? Or that catalyst or impetus for something to happen. And we talked about, might there be petitions, kind of coming up, or quote unquote demands from, certain folks, or really pointing out, hey, we want things to be a bit different here. So they're all the way from even leadership can really drive, hey, we need to prioritize, we need to take action, we need strategies. So a lot of that why was really explored. We kept expanding, why, a group might really form, and how helpful it can be to really process and talk through that. So thanks for that, Andy. I really appreciated joining you all too. It was a great conversation. All right, how about our group 2? Any thoughts, reflections, things you want to share for the good of the group?
No one ever wants to talk. I will just say for myself, the combination of your advice about getting a small group together to kind of start the work makes a lot of sense. I think when you're a supervisor, you often are the ones that are pushing things, and to have that work feel a little bit more empowering, and to have people have a little more interest, it makes a lot of sense to really take a look at who's interested in doing the work, and how they can get the rest of the team involved.
Excellent reflections. And that's the thing, I'm hoping, don't feel like you have to go at this alone, and I know culturally I'm more collectivist anyways. And it really does mean we need to activate all of us, and we're going to be participating and engaging in very different ways. And so exactly that, if you have folks with the experience, skills, knowledge that can really contribute and actually add, right, and even have diversity that you don't encompass, right, or have, brilliant. If we can effectively collaborate, around that component, that's brilliant. So I really appreciate those reflections. That was great. Anything else from group 2? Any other thoughts or ahas?
I think that something that just came up for me is that it's longitudinal work, right? I think the instant solution, quick solve, these are the challenges and the barriers we keep running into, doesn't mean that's the end of the line. And so I felt really inspired by members of our group to think about like, where are we going beyond, like we've hit the walls that we know, now what walls are beyond that we need to explore, find people who've made it over, to kind of take some modeling from them.
I love that. And I always think of these groups too, folks, are a space of innovation. Those visions of what you imagine around a group coming together that are prioritizing and truly trying to live inclusion, equity, intercultural competence. This is a place for folks to try that on. And it's going to be kind of fumbling through, figuring out, because many folks that I engage with and as they're building this space, like, oh my goodness, I I needed this. I am always looking forward to it. It's different than a lot of the other places and spaces I'm experiencing. And so for some folks, it may be the first time, they're in an environment where they feel completely empowered to share some of the experiences and things that they've been thinking, for example, in that process of becoming more vulnerable, and kind of demonstrating that courage and that vulnerability, in a lot of sense, folks are practicing those skills, and so as much as you can be intentional around the structure, this is what I mean by infusing the development in the process and practice, rather than having Amy come in and talk to you about, let's talk about trust building, right? We're actually doing this together by accomplishing the work and coming together and collaborating. So definitely consider this as that kind of practitioner perspective. It's kind of your lab, right? You're trying on different and new behaviors that you've not necessarily done before, which I find really exciting, right? And it does mean more vulnerability, courage, stretching yourself, as well. And it can be a pretty magical experience. Yeah, that's great, Liz. Appreciate that. All right, in group 3, any thoughts, ahas, reflections? How was your conversation?
I can start. We had Beatriz and Elizabeth and Samuel in the group. You know, we talked about the vulnerability, right? And so it's interesting, right, that you ended with that. But I think it's powerful, right? I think it's also important that people are not, re-victimized, right, in the storytelling, right? But I think it is important to, we all have a stake in it, right? So what's that stake? So I think once there is some vulnerability in the process, it does tend to move it, that ownership tends to feel a little bit more, right? We also talked about agreeing to disagree. And I think that's fine. I think um, DEI work is not so linear, right? That it's and and at the same time it's a little messy, right? So I think you perfectly put it, Amy, at the beginning, where um, my view of DEI work is completely different than somebody else's, right? So and I think another member also talked about evolving. I think that's the piece of it, right? Where it might make sense right now, it might not necessarily work the next day, or the next time. I think I can point to, at least in the work that I do, right, where language often changes, right? And some people may still be identified as one specific term, while others may not, right? And how do you come in the middle with that? How do you show representation within within the group and maybe outside that community? So
I'm loving all that you're sharing. I really appreciate that. Great reflections. Anyone in group 3 want to build upon that? Any other comments or thoughts? And I think these groups also create that space of that self-awareness and connection as well. I think at times folks may be kind of minimizing authenticity or aspects of themselves in their day-to-day kind of interactions, realities, and environments, for example. And that's another component in what I was just mentioning. Think meta about these groups, and it actually lends itself to our next segments or aspects of our guide and tool together. If you don't mind, I'll just kind of share and talk about that. Is really thinking about that group membership and team building, aspects. Now, here's the thing, folks. I have found, and I am someone, as you can see, I'm very strategic. And in fact, I'm classically trained as a scientist. My background, I do have an animal science degree. So I do think, very scientifically about a lot of things. And one of the revelations that I had while doing this work over time is just, what Oscar was just actually saying to all of us, how that vulnerability, the trust, right? The interpersonal dynamics, such a huge priority when you are establishing or bringing groups together, especially that are going to focus and aspire to really role model and lead diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice efforts. And initially, you all should know, my first iteration of this guide, to be very transparent, I didn't even have a segment on team building, right? That wasn't even, I'm like, okay, yeah, we're going to get to know each other, because that was also something that I just kind of even assumed or taken for granted, right? Sometimes we can assume that, hey, everybody coming into the space, we're all team builders. This is just going to kind of organically happen, and we know what we don't like or what we've been experiencing. So magically, let's, put us all together and it'll happen, for example. And so just so you know, that was a big revelation and aha. And in fact, for this Inclusive Culture Council, right, for the entire college, we spent a good portion of our entire first semester in the fall just focused on team building, trust, connection, getting to know one another, getting to know our resources, the support, creating a communication and collaboration model to kind of demonstrate for the group, get used to communicating, kind of collaborating, sharing information. There's not, that is action. You are making progress. And I think that's something that oftentimes, even when I'm coaching folks, leaders, etc., the relationship building culturally can be so undervalued to more of the task and output. And I'm here to tell you, this relationship building is progress. It is taking action. It is very much needed, especially in this space, for example. Let me pause and check in. I saw the chat kind of come up with a couple comments. And so, oh, good. Yep. Summing up. That was a great, summary. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything there. So here are a couple things that we have to consider, okay? There is a difference in these spaces and places when you're thinking and getting very clear around the purpose, kind of the scope, responsibilities. That's where we need to start thinking strategically around who might really be represented in this group, right? Because there is passion, interest, right? And then there's also skills, action, right? Leadership, for example. And so you need to be clear in thinking about how might you need to balance both. Is the purpose and entity for this particular group? Do you need to rely on folks that have past experiences, exposure, skills that they've demonstrated around diversity, equity, and inclusion? Is there space for folks that may be brand new and are wanting to get involved? Maybe they don't have those experiences, haven't had the opportunity, right? Or the privilege to do so. Is there space in this community and the purpose for that? Okay. And I think that's something that, I definitely recommend thinking critically, because at times, especially new initiatives, a lot of folks might be interested and want to be engaged. And that's where, again, that purpose statement can really help folks kind of even self-identify if it might be an experience or right for them as well. So here are some of the things that I just, generally recommend in your consideration as well when you're thinking about that, and really balancing the passion with those that do have the experience, skills, and knowledge as well, is thinking about, again, with this particular group, you have to think about the infrastructure and support around it. So are there leadership? Are there sponsors? Are there resources and even a budget? You can proactively be thinking about what is available to support this entity, right? And who's going to need to be involved with the actual group itself to enable that decision making around the budget, for example. You know, oftentimes, even in literature, you need a kind of budgetary, high level decision maker that actually can make decisions for the organization, deeply involved with these types of groups as well. Okay. Also, thinking about other influential members, you know, of the group or beyond. And I'm providing here a link specifically. I really like Deloitte University Press's research on the 6 signature traits of inclusive leadership. And this can really help you kind of establish and even questions you might ask folks if you have some sort of kind of form or application process, you know, or sharing their interest and background and experience. You can really ground in those 6 signature traits and some of these questions that you might ask folks as well, to really contribute and kind of figure out kind of where are folks coming from too. Here in 5, we're talking about anyone that can be impacted. How are you going to communicate and involve them? Here's something that I've also learned in doing this work. Sometimes we expect students are going to be attending some committee meeting at the same time every other week, you know, and think that we're going to have all this great involvement. So just know for different stakeholders, you're going to have to think about different ways that they're going to be involved, right? So do you have different folks that once you draft a policy, right? Because we have some folks that are going to be kind of reviewing and drafting policy. Do you have a student advisory group that you then kind of call a meeting or invite them to make comments on that, right? And give feedback. So here's where you can get a bit creative and thinking about what are the best ways to communicate and engage our different stakeholders that would be meaningful and worthwhile of their time, all the while kind of supporting your efforts and moving things forward too. And then again, number 6 around outlining the responsibilities, I want to share another strategy that I've recently done with our Inclusive Culture Council. Basically what I did was, we outlined kind of the mission of the group. Again, remember that purpose statement that helped us really draft that. And then also the key responsibilities. So one of them is really going to be kind of being an advisory role and giving, feedback, suggestions to our college leadership. And so what I did was created an actual tool where I took each of those responsibilities and then I created a second column. And for each responsibility, I outlined different recommendations to help folks get ready to do that. So for example, one recommendation was make sure you're taking opportunities and spending time getting to know our college leaders, right? Beyond just the work, build some of that relationship capital, right? Really build and get to know them, right? And so others is, linking them to specific strategic plans, and making sure they're up to date with our campus DEI efforts so that they can inform and support our college leadership, for example. And then the final column of the form is kind of an open space where folks could then outline their additional strategies. What else do I want to be doing? What do I need to develop? What skills, right, or experiences do I want to get so that I can better advise and give feedback, especially around, equity and policy making, for example. So that's what you can really do when you outline those responsibilities. You can kind of level set, right, and make sure that folks really can understand and are very clear on what's expected and then what's there to support them. One other thing that I'm pretty proud of as well is this compensation piece. So the enrollment management group that I'm working with, we've worked with the leaders, and so they get a monthly stipend for serving on their DEI advisory committee. And I think this is going to become more and more common practice, just so you know, of really thinking about, especially how are we incentivizing and ensuring that folks are really feeling like what they're contributing is being reciprocated as well, okay? So those are some really important things to consider around the group membership. And what I was hoping that we could do is I'm going to send you back, just for a little bit into your smaller groups to talk about team building a little bit. So I want you to start sharing some ideas. And when we come back, my whole thought is share your team building exercises and activities in the chat so that we can kind of walk away with some different strategies as well. So what we've done here basically is we can review and think of these as key outcomes. If you were to think about in a group forming, coming together, meetings, anytime that you're communicating, what are ways that you can ensure these outcomes might be met? Okay, so everything from identify and productively navigate conflict and diversity of perspectives. Remember when we were talking about agree to disagree, for example? So what could be some, activities or ways that we can get to know one another that would really support and help us to be able to navigate that when it does come up? So any questions, comments? Otherwise, I'm going to send you back into your same breakout rooms just to start talking about what are some of the great team building, relationship building exercises and activities. And then when we come back, we're going to post those in the chat, kind of close up our time together already. So, okay, I don't see any. So I'm going to open all rooms and we're going to come back probably at 20 after the hour. So be prepared to share your activities. Okay, welcome back, folks. I hope that kind of gave you a little pep, some energy for those that do get energy from anticipating or envisioning kind of group interaction experiences. Other folks are like, I have to put forth a lot of energy to do that. Okay. And I want to invite us now in the chat, go ahead and give a brief synopsis around some of those exercises that you thought would be very purposeful. I know a group was talking about, and that's why I outlined some of those outcomes, right? And objectives has purpose, intentionality that really you found can be very supportive when you're thinking of team building. And it can be initially and things you need to revisit. So for example, as you're kind of typing, anytime there is some sort of local or major event or crisis. So we're navigating a historic wildfire that happened very close to our campus here in Colorado. And so we had to activate a lot that was going on. Within our college, we had 7 staff, faculty, and a graduate student lose their home to the fire, for example. So, and over a dozen had damage. It was pretty impactful. I think we had almost 1,000 homes that were lost. And many were affiliated with our campus. And so in our meetings, when we come together, we always create space to start checking in. How are you all doing? Kind of name what some major event or thing that may have been happening, or, even holidays or, things that might be important to the group. We know to create that space to kind of check in and process a little bit too. So go ahead and put in your team builder, icebreakers, ideas into the chat. I'm going to make sure that you walk away with plenty of ideas and thoughts, things that you found meaningful and helpful. All right, well, we're finishing that up, folks. Now, I just want to kind of share a little bit and give you an overview of what you can expect as you move through the rest of this guide and plan. Now we're kind of getting that place of strategic plans, right? Actually getting things kind of down, ready to go to where it might be viewed by multiple stakeholders and you may need to have input, etc. And so I wanted to provide you some strategies that are really important to think about and consider, especially utilizing data. You really will benefit by being in tune, really knowing your data sources. And I, gave some, examples here. And this could be an exercise to go back with your colleagues or, other folks to start really processing and thinking, what data do we have to help inform us on what strategies or, initiatives or things that we need to focus on or priorities, for example. So it's really important. I can't emphasize enough, be data driven, know how to utilize, communicate about, and make decisions around data as well. This is going to be a key component around strategic planning, especially for diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice work as well. And that'll help inform too, right? Because we talked about alignment, kind of the purpose. Now we've added in data. Now you're ready to really think about the goals for the group. What are the overarching priorities? And how are you going to prioritize them, right? And get, the different perspectives as to what the priorities and purpose are, okay? I've created a quick little chart here for you to consider and think about, really regards to creating a timeline and task list as well. So you can kind of explore, these components, and it's basically saying who might be responsible, for this particular task, who could support us in completing the task, who needs to be consulted, right? Who do we need to keep informed? And you can kind of log any task updates. All the while, any task, this is where the strategy comes in mind, should map to one of the goals or outcomes of the group, right? If we're doing something, it should be tied to really what we're trying to accomplish as well. So this is just a strategy to help you kind of outline. Our enrollment management group has an entire model that they've been kind of tracking. We have 2 subcommittees that are going, and they have kind of the whole table kind of filled out with communications that need to happen, who's creating the agenda, etc. So that can be very helpful as well. Next, thinking about your assessment strategy and plan. Any of these tasks or, tactics, anything you implement, how are you going to measure the impact? How do you know you're making progress towards reaching those goals? So you're going to really want to draft to make sure that you know how you're collecting your data and utilizing that to inform tweaks, right? When you have to shift things. And then finally, the last 2 components, here's an exercise that you can do with your group. You can start thinking about other strategies and brainstorming together. What are other ways that we can create an inclusive and an effective team environment amongst our group? And so you can kind of capture some of those ideas here. And then I just want to point out 2 pivotal resources that I always refer back to and utilize. Dr. Damon Williams is really involved with a lot of the inclusive excellence work nationally. So even the National Inclusive Excellence Leadership Academy, which I have been through and been a part of, it's excellent. These are 2 really pivotal resources that can really support these efforts, especially if you're getting into that strategic planning. That second one, that AIR model, is brilliant. That you need accountability, infrastructure, incentives, and resources to really have impactful DEI strategic plans as well. All right, with that, folks, that is the resource and tool that I wanted to provide with you all and make sure that you had a copy of it. And so now we just have a few moments, but I want to open it up, see if there are any other thoughts, questions, anything else that you'd like to process through. I would absolutely welcome that. While you're thinking about any questions, I also invite in the chat if you want to go ahead and put in what is one step or what do you plan to do after you leave here, right? You now have this planning guide. I've had some great conversations and connected with other folks. So if you don't mind, even in the chat, just sharing what's one next step for you. What are you going to do? Some of you might be, hey, I might share this guide with so-and-so, or set up tea, and have a conversation. So please do share any thoughts and next steps. Thanks so much, Andy. Great seeing you. And with that, what else? Any other questions, comments, anything else we didn't get to cover or focus on that you have questions about? Yep, there we go. See, sharing the guide. There you go. Yep, it's great. Oh, I love that approach, Elizabeth. Kind of even using that as kind of an assessment around your experiences, right? And what else we might be needing. That's what I mean. This can even be kind of transformational. You might already be meeting, doing your work. Might this spark some ideas, right? Or areas to focus on. That's great. Any final comments, questions? Thanks so much. Oh, well, appreciate you all so much. Thank you for being dedicated. Thanks for being, drawn to strategic planning, equity, and inclusion work. This is really a sweet spot that I absolutely love and adore. So what I'm going to do, if you need anything, and any further development, consultation, coaching, anything else you might need, you can reach out to me directly as well. If anything comes up with any of the resources. I'll turn it over to Liz and Samuel. Thank you all so much for hosting. This has been great.